the official Zoom add-in plugin interface, cannot speak to its accessibility, but you can apparently it gives you a pseudo mixer for each individual participant. You can stereo pan them, level them.
Ooh,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
And that's going good?
It looks to be. Let's just double check.
Yeah.
Yep, that's
That's
good.
a good sign.
Hey,
Okay.
we are recording live.
We are.
We're live.
We're live.
All right. Why did I not see that coming? I should have.
Oh, I think you did. I think you sort of did.
Oh, nice. Nice.
There we go.
Both ends. Love that.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Zoom recording in 3, 2, 1.
Recording in progress.
Live from the Musa Slobodian Network studio, welcome to the Ali and Makara Show, part of the Musa Slobodian Network. This is the show where the hosts discuss technology, their favorite songs, the books they've been reading throughout the week, as long as some friendly banter along the way. Here are your hosts, Ali Musa and Makara Slobodian.
Good afternoon. Today's Friday, January 23rd, 2026. We have an intro again. How exciting is that? And of course, I am joined today by my ever-present co-host, Ali Musa.
Thank you so much for having me in the studio today.
Always, we love getting to have these bonus shows. And speaking of bonus shows, today we're joined by tech enthusiast Jack Falejczyk. Jack, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Congrats, you got it right.
The joys of name pronunciations, right?
Oh, yes. So let's start with that burning question that we were sort of talking about off air for a few minutes here. In your perspective here, why do you feel that why is voiceover on the Mac in that direction that it is, where editing text, like specifically when it comes to editing text, Windows and JAWS do that a lot better than what voiceover on the Mac does in terms of that?
Well, it's a few reasons. I think one of the biggest ones is, well, for one, a lot of the editing commands that you see on Windows are inherently native Windows commands that the screen reader can piggyback on. Whereas with Mac and VoiceOver, among other things, a lot of the commands, not so much all the text editing commands, are implemented by VoiceOver in such a way that everything has to be run through its own keyboard processing. There's also the problem that the macOS cursor is more of a from to paradigm rather than from through, where when you hit the left and right arrow key to move between characters on Windows, you can almost guarantee that you're going to run into a situation where the very character that you run into is going to allow you to delete the previous or the next character based on whether you press backspace or forward delete respectively. Whereas on the Mac, you have the somewhat broken nature of the double entry in that left and right arrow key will, if you press them one after the other, it's almost like turning around in a circle where you will run into the same character, and you may often forget that the delete key deletes that character instead of the previous one, for example. That's just one of many oddities that kind of sort of break consistency between Windows and Mac as far as editing is concerned.
See, and to bring a bit of a JAWS comparison in here, the neat thing there, in comparison to VoiceOver, which VoiceOver doesn't quite have an equivalent, is there are times you can turn off, like that, where it's useful to do that, to turn off the virtual PC cursor, so you can stay within your Forms mode and continue to edit.
Indeed, you can turn off the virtual cursor. You can do. You can have different navigation modes, like navigating a document.
Yep.
Versus editing. Use your heading keys. Both JAWS and NVDA have respective command sets for that, and ways to turn on and off the various navigation modes and edit modes, and to avoid things like accidental edits. I mean, there's yet to be an easy way to do that in your macOS editors of choice.
And then it gets stuck with this whole. Then VoiceOver gets stuck. Then it gets like, you didn't do anything, and it gets stuck with this not responding business on the Mac.
I swear till the day I die. 128 gigabytes of RAM on a Mac Studio, the most beefy M4 Pro Max processor you can get, and VoiceOver will still, at points in far too many to count, say not responding.
Yep. And it's like it gets stuck.
It does. VoiceOver is mostly a single-threaded performer, so it can't. If it gets hung up on something, it's gonna stay hung up, and it once used to say busy, which was annoying, but at least you knew it was either working or pretending to work. Now, if it says not responding, an application is either not responding or it's pretending to not respond because VoiceOver thinks it's not responding, so it always says not responding. So VoiceOver replaced shouldn't be so complicated, but it is, complicated problem with an even more complicated non-solution.
Yep, that's basically sort of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it just goes. It harkens back to the fact that Windows is not a very ideal operating system. It is a pile inside of a pile. We've seen what Windows 11 has become. And yet, strangely enough, it is the operating system that, in a way, keeps accessibility honest. And it's not because of anything it inherently does, except for one thing: still allowing for third-party screen readers, and thus the accessibility to be kept in the hands of those who need it most, where you have things like you don't have an NVDA on the Mac, you don't have a JAWS on the Mac, and so when you have a company, the only screen reader on the Mac worked on by a company whose main market force isn't necessarily accessibility, it leaves little lesser room for things like VoiceOver in need of a refactor to allow for parallel processing, for example. NV Access, if you look at NVDA and the way it's headed, the fact that it's going full 64-bit next year, or this year now. JAWS has gone full 64-bit with a 32-bit bit bridge, and yet that's because you have two companies whose main focus is access technology. And that's not to say that a company behind the computer and the operating system shouldn't be invested in accessibility. They certainly should. But to be invested in accessibility should mean allowing for competition, because good competition, healthy competition, keeps companies honest about the state of things, the state of where they are, where everyone else is, where they need to be, if nothing else, just so that they can have a slice of the pie. But really, because a true accessibility focus implies, hey, look, we're all on the same team. We're all people with disabilities who need the technology just as much as our users do, kind of thing.
Yeah. And Makara, if we bring the iPhone into this picture, if you look at the way you would navigate on the iPhone and the way VoiceOver on the iPhone is, yes, it has its sort of issues, but it's far more smoother than it is on the Mac. And I'm sure that's been your experience as well.
Ain't that the truth?
Well, you can
It
actually
really
scroll
is.
quickly on the iPhone, right? Like on the Mac, you can't scroll quickly through anything. It just immediately gets stuck.
You're right. I mean, it really, you and the frustrating bit is that you never know, depending on the application you're in, when it's going to get stuck. You could scroll quickly through, you may be able to scroll quickly through a well-optimized app. You're not going to be able to scroll quickly through the thing that you'll scroll quickly through, more likely, a list of items in your Finder.
Right.
How frustrating. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. The iPhone, and it's because VoiceOver, I don't think VoiceOver on the iPhone has, it I think for one thing, Apple's focus seems to be on their main group of highly active blind users, and that is iPhone users. I think we can all kind of speculate that the reason Apple went the distance to implement Eloquence was to try and drive more Mac conversions. Yeah, that didn't work. So, and that's like, I think it's it's an odd disconnect between between understandings versus reality, and the fact that is that that Apple, at least a part of it, may think that the big driving force behind keeping people on Windows is having Eloquence as their screen reader voice. And okay, for some people, yes. For some people, that is definitely a determining factor, or was before Apple added Eloquence into the Mac. However, that is only part of the larger whole. And I think there's a disconnect between the understanding, kind of the perceived reality versus the actual reality. And it really is what happens when you don't have, I mean, if you look at every other company and their engagement level from within the major, greater VI community and the accessibility community at large, you've got representatives from Microsoft, you've got Google, Mozilla, you name it, on the socials, just as users, as themselves, acting in a somewhat staff capacity and really kind of taking into account feedback that gets taken back to the company as a whole. And yet, you don't really get that as much, if at all, with Apple. And I think it'd be one thing if there were competition on the Mac side, but I think the reason why, the fact that there isn't, is what is making Apple kind of not have a frame of reference when compared to the state of things on Windows.
Yeah, that's a very sort of important sort of consideration there, because see, if you look at it, and also if you look at Apple's system, which is iCloud, it's not as, in my perspective, I'm pretty much in the I'm pretty much in the Google workspace interface. And the reason is because, first of all, I find it easier to use, for one. Yes, I do have an iPhone here and an iPad, but the beauty is you can use those products with the iPhone and iPad.
Very well, mind you.
Yeah. And so, but what I found is that because it's more, it brings the universalness in, and I find that it's, and whereas yes, you can use iCloud on the web, but it also is not like, it's not, the experience is pretty bad compared with a screen reader compared to what you get with the Google products.
The reality with iCloud on the web
Can I just say
is
it's
the
terrible?
same reality as anything with FaceTime on the web, for example. Can you use Google stuff on the web? Yes. Can you use iCloud or FaceTime on the web? Almost yes.
That's the key word right there. Almost.
Almost yes. And unfortunately, too, the double-edged sword with that approach that Apple takes, at least with FaceTime, it is definitely blatantly intentional. The almost is the main thing that drives iPhone purchases. But it leads to bad interoperability for those who already have an iPhone, who've already purchased it, but maybe using Windows. It's like, it's almost as if that market force isn't listened to, despite the fact that these are the same people who buy iPhones either every year or nearly every year. So the recurring revenue is real. And yet, somehow that isn't enough. Somehow, and this is the curse with ecosystem, entire ecosystem companies or approaches, is that you don't have, Google focused on the ecosystem before they had the platform. They had inherited Android to round out the ecosystem entirely. Whereas Apple is very much OS first, ecosystem second. And as such, their ecosystem, how many iCloud Mail users do we honestly, see when compared to Gmail users, for example?
I have a Gmail account, a couple actually. As you know, I've got two. I have a Gmail, and I've also got the workspace side, which I've got the domain and stuff connected there.
There you go.
So I've got technically two, because it's technically a Gmail account because it's a Google because
Right, it's a Google Workspace.
yeah.
Google, G Suite account.
Yep.
There you go. And with Apple, you don't really have. And I think it's just simply because they, as any company has tried to do, the hypergrowth is dangerous when not done right away, because what you have is a bunch of new, and you have so much new that you don't focus on things that were started and not finished. When's the last time the Voiceover hotspots feature got some love? And the multi-touch trackpad? There's a good one.
Yeah. Have you used the trackpad, McCary? You've got a laptop, I believe. I'm on a Mac Mini here.
Yeah, I do have a laptop, and I will very occasionally use the trackpad, but mostly I keep it off because it's so sensitive that if you lean on it wrong, you're going to be messing with something.
Yep.
Like
Well, the biggest thing is...
Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Because I was going to say, my whole tech training was keyboard based, so using the trackpad very rarely came up.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to say, Jack?
Oh, so the flip side of that And what makes the Mac difficult to approach, so let's say, I too am someone who very much started on strictly keyboard.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm right there with you. The flip side of that, you've seen a lot of people that have started on that had their start on an iPhone, and then one of the biggest contradictions between iPhone and Mac really would have to be the fact that people who, on the outside looking in, hear such myths as, oh, if you know how to use the iPhone's multi-touch gestures, you know how to use the Mac. No, not really, not really / not at all. Partially because a lot of the gestures that you have on the iPhone have not been implemented at all on the Mac, or have very different and not so familiar results when acted upon. Two-finger swipes as a big example of that. And it's also a bit of a conceptual difference too. You're talking about a multi-touch trackpad versus a kind of grid-based touchscreen. So you're talking about two different beasts here. And so the learning curve, and when you consider the fact that Apple's never been really good about maintaining their tutorials. They only just now have one for the iPhone, and the macOS VoiceOver doesn't mention QuickNav. For example, it didn't mention QuickNav for the longest time. So you're gonna scare you're gonna scare off people who are one-handed, for example, who are visually impaired but also one-handed, because those VO keys are, talk about finger gymnastics for two-handed users. If you don't have QuickNav on.
No kidding. And it's funny that you mentioned starting out on the keyboard, because I did want to ask you, because I always think it's interesting as part of this conversation to ask where you started and maybe what you find useful now in comparison to where you started.
Started on, the Windows / Windows note taker / CP/M based note takers era too, because I started on Braille and Speak as well. But Windows as far back as 98 Millennium and XP, as far as graphical user interface, as far as the core fundamental concepts of the graphical user interface we now know as Windows today. And then I had experience with the Mac going as far back as far as VoiceOver goes, Mac OS Tiger, the first version that had VoiceOver built in, because, for a while, as anyone who's used a Mac before, pre-OS 10 knows, OS 10 killed Outspoken. Mac OS 10 killed Outspoken because they fundamentally redid things with Cocoa, and with a new interface behind a Mac, and Alpha Access Group just was not equipped to handle the switch. So macOS went 3 versions without a screen reader. At that point, during that era, most people who got their start naturally started on Windows by default. And then Apple realized that they were about to lose the education sector if they didn't get VoiceOver. Or didn't get a screen reader. It wasn't going to be called VoiceOver at the time. It was called Screen Preview at the time in beta. But that pretty much birthed VoiceOver. And at the time, because of procurement laws, Apple had really pulled out the stops, all of them, to get VoiceOver really where it needed to be. And it was absolutely an unstoppable force when it first got its start. But then Apple lost the education sector to Google. And so their main market force was iPhones, where they had stood to make a lot more recurring revenue. And creatives, the accessible creation scene with things like, Reaper and accessibility and, such like that, on the Mac side had been kind of in a divot phase with, Logic not being very accessible at the time, and, Pro Tools, people still on older versions of Pro Tools with Macintosh G4s for the accessibility. And so the creative force, the creative market wasn't really a accessibility needing force in Apple's eyes. So Apple focused their accessibility intentions, I'm sure, on where there were more active users, and that being the iPhone crowd, meant that VoiceOver accessibility took a dive in Windows. And it's not so much that it took a dive, actually, it's more so that Windows accessibility had taken the chance to catch up. With things like NVDA and even the improved narrator and stuff like that. And Apple didn't see that. I don't know, maybe they didn't see it as a threat because you had several iPhone users, and just because people were using Windows didn't necessarily mean that they were automatically going to switch to Android, or another good punchline, Windows Phone.
Yeah, that too. Now, Makara, I should ask you, though.
Go ahead.
That, and now you also have you also have a bit of an older Mac as well. And,
Yes.
right? No, I'm not, no.
I feel like I'm really getting sort of thrown under something here today.
No, Makara, no, I promise you're not.
No, I know, I'm joking with you.
I know.
I had an older Mac. I had a 2015 MacBook Pro for the longest time.
Okay, see, and that's still older than mine is now. So
No, no,
thank you, Jack.
You're welcome.
I will. But now, when that Mac, when it eventually no longer works,
Mm-hmm.
are you, or do you feel, if and when you're able, or on the flip side of that would be, if it was necessary to come down to, would you do you think you would replace it with say another Mac or another computer of some kind?
It is a question that I have been considering lately, because it's going to come down to it sooner than later, and just given the conversation here, given some of the conversations we've had previously between ourselves and with others, it's really adding a lot of considerations to that decision that I might not have otherwise had. Like, when I got this one, it was very much, oh yeah, you'll get another Mac because that's what you worked with up until that point, and I didn't really have a frame of reference for Windows.
I mean, you and I have talked about it offline a little bit.
We have, yeah.
Yeah, and I think but I think, though, see, if it comes to a point where see, and I mean, the other side of it is as well, like, what I find nowadays is that you find a lot of people, like, just kind of use their phones for a lot, like, for pretty much everything, which, if it's me, I actually can't, personally, I can't do that, personally.
Neither can I. I mean, a lot of the time, I mean, what's interesting is that it's funny that on the iPhone these days, the if you need to do something on the computer, there's an ironically more accessible way to remotely control a Windows machine with an iPhone and a Bluetooth keyboard, or even now little programmable voiceover gestures with an NVDA remote client, than it is to control a running Mac running VoiceOver from the iPhone directly.
That's nuts.
is not what you'd expect.
No.
But it's there nonetheless. I mean, if you ever, and that's the fact that people are devising ways to remote control a computer via a phone. The proof's in the pudding. The phone, there are things that are just still more practical on the desktop side
Exactly.
that aren't mobile ready, or are mobile ready for a general audience, but aren't mobile ready from an accessibility standpoint.
Yep.
And a big, huge gap still exists within the creative space. Any mobile DAW, such as, you're not going to see a Reaper, for example, on the iPhone.
No.
You're not going to see something with the level of accessibility and attention given to it, the modifiability rather too, because a lot of accessibility has existed through open APIs and modification and such. You're just not gonna see that on the iPhone. I mean, Goldwave did hit the iPhone briefly.
Yes.
There wasn't, just strictly because of the cross-platform interface toolkit they were using. They weren't able to, initially they weren't even able to do accessibility at all because the cross-platform tool they were using did not expose native accessibility elements via Swift native or via Kotlin on Android. So there was no accessibility period at the time. But there still won't be, because you won't have that level of modifiability because, mobile, for better or for worse, a mobile application is very sandboxed, and you can't do things like, screen reader code injection, API interface and stuff like that we kind of are able to do on Windows and Mac like it's nothing. From a development standpoint, not like it's nothing, but from a user standpoint, like it's nothing. And that is really where, for us, the desktop is still a complete necessity, because you just won't see a relatively simple creative suite on the iPhone that can do the same thing, or at least close to the same thing, kind of mobile, apropos from mobile setup that you would expect on the computer.
But even things like Google Calendar, and of course Zoom, I find the experience, I actually prefer it on the both on the desktop side, and
Yeah, me
because
too.
the mobile apps are good, and they're very functional and they work very well, but I feel like it's just what I'm used to is the desktop.
I'm used to my keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah.
I'm used to my, from a navigation standpoint, if I'm not looking for something real quick, okay, they're workable.
Yep.
But if I need something in a pinch, you can bet I'm going to be looking for those keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah.
And shuddering when they're not present on the mobile, because they have every reason to be. They really do have every reason to be. I mean, both of these platforms, iOS is Unix under the hood. Android is more explicitly Linux kernel based. But there are plenty of examples of, Android, as far as QWERTY keyboard support in applications, maybe not so much in TalkBack for the longest time, but in an application, it really, theoretically, technically has been able to expose, to do keyboard shortcuts, depending on what you're looking at. But you just don't get that same level of, I think we're starting to with the iOS to Mac kind of bridge, but really, you see the bridge moving between, even with iOS apps on the Mac. And I run, I could run the app for the Instapot on the Mac, for example, and there are things that it just will not do, straight up will not do.
Yeah.
When compared to running on the phone.
Yep.
with voice. Yeah, and
Yeah, that's a big thing. And kind of circle it back just for a second to we were talking about the Google products earlier. Even using I used to even using for example, Makara, I think you saw this coming or you saw it, but even using the mail app on the on the iPhone and Mac, can I just be honest? I hate it in comparison.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I hate it compared to the Gmail interface on both the iPhone native apps and on the desktop interface, which I like to call the Gmail web interface. I hate the mail app in comparison. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think even for sighted people, I mean, maybe a little bit accessibility benefit too, but there was a application made for the Mac side specifically for leveraging Gmail specific features called MimeStream, and that clearly enough people across the board feel as though the mail app is inferior by comparison to Gmail proper, or even just a fully featured email provider agnostic mail program like Thunderbird or EM Client or the like that has various features like message snoozing, message scheduling. EM Client had its own message snoozing feature. It had its own PGP key, PGP, GPG. I forget, missing my acronyms. Key system for secure, secure email if in cases where that was needed. Where you can't really, you just don't get a lot of relative workability and feature set with the basic by comparison mail app for the Mac and iPhone.
Now, some people would sort of say to me, well, that I'm nuts to do that. But the thing is that, see, it's fine for it's fine if somebody's just looking for the basic sort of it's same with the contacts app on the that also it's kind of a contrast with the mail app a little bit if you look at it.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Yeah, it is a little bit. And if you look at funny you mentioned contacts because iMessage, adding someone to your contacts on the Mac is a right royal pain because you have that pop the flyover widget that does not set VoiceOver focus 9 times out of 10. You have to restart VoiceOver, and even then, you may not get it, and that poses a problem if you're trying to let's say in a group message, especially where this is especially has been a problem pre OS 26 and as there was if you wanted to add a group member to your contacts, that was painful on the Mac. It was all right on the phone. It was all right on the iPhone, but absolutely painful on the Mac.
But they've also made it a multi-step process now that I don't like either. Like if you get a number, like you want to add somebody from the message to your contacts, it's like they've made that from the iMessage. They've made it a multi-step process where you have to click, you have to do like several clicks before you can actually get it there, even if you want to add it to the existing contact.
Yep, I mean, it is a problem. I mean, you can't VO shift them on a message and say have a contextual menu option up here that just says senders not your contacts, add to exist, sub menu, add to existing, create new. Boom. And if a contact card is present, because it's gotten easier in a group conversation or otherwise to kind of pass contact cards into the thread, it
from the share sheet
does not auto detect and speed up the contact adding process.
No, yeah. Yeah, it really does, and
This-
and I think you end up kind of like see, and like that's the other thing that Apple has made things more difficult than it needs to be in a lot of situations, and a lot of simple
Yeah.
situations too.
Yeah, it's. I always like to, when it comes to UX, I always like to think of, good UX. Good UX should be as effectively intuitive to control as an appliance. Now, by that I mean an appliance with good old physical buttons and switches.
Yeah.
But for the last 20 years, have we really had to think twice about how we do the seatbelt, for example? I mean, have we really had to think twice about
No.
a door's standard push bar, or just a faucet, anything like that? No. So with the technology being practically more prevalent in our day to day than it may have been even 10 years ago, let alone pre-iPhones, I think it would behoove any company to treat user interface, user experience with the same level of attention they would an appliance. And unfortunately, it makes sense why most don't, because I mean, if not for if not for unawareness, which most, when we talk about Apple accessibility, Google accessibility, any of these companies, they're very aware.
Yeah.
What the problem is that most app developers that are, kind of engagement driven, ad driven, if you are treated with a simple, intuitive interface, that enables in and out usage. And app developers don't want in and out usage. They want you to be engaged longer. And if it takes changing the interface up on you, then they'll do that to drive more engagement, because longer engagement means more ads that they can display if you are one of those apps that display sponsored content, and more ads means more ad revenue for the advertisers. So I always like to point out that advertisers almost inherently, by nature of principle, their core, their kind of modus operandi, they kind of fly in the face of accessibility best practices, because accessibility best practices kind of discourage the very nature of kind of forced in your face content that disrupts your reading flow.
Yep. Yeah, that makes totally, because they're more focused on the ad side of it, and that's what's generating the revenue. And even AI is an ad generator.
Yeah, it is. It definitely, because I mean, look at the fact that most and the average language model is basically a pattern predictor. I mean, it has all this content that it is basically its digital brain, and it kind of decides what to respond with based on analysis of what it in its knowledge thinks is going to be the most likely good thing to say, kind of mimicking that human thought, but only until eventually what's going to happen is exactly what happens to search engines today. Sponsored content, sponsored patterns. It's going to be whoever pays the most for. Everything. It was like often the often touted analogy of what if you're autonomous, that you're hypothetically your autonomous car, you want it to go to you go to a certain charging station in your area, but it does a detour and goes to another one because that one paid more for a listing.
That's a really interesting part of that. And kind of on the subject of AI, we've been talking a lot about are there ways to use that responsibly? And I just kind of wonder, like, what does it mean to you to use AI responsibly? Is that even a thing?
Great question. I mean, responsible AI use is, I think first and foremost, um, there is going to be naturally a certain level of, you know, when you're approaching what to do about AI, or not do about it, or not do with it, you have to, you know, we have to use it, if nothing else, to understand, you know, I would say responsible use is using it in an effort to gain an understanding of its inherent limitations and where it falls short, i.e., bad practices, so that awareness can be raised as to, you know, from a development standpoint, practices to avoid. Like, for example, I know, what happens when, if you don't, a lot of people, if you're using AI to see what it'll come up with, and you realize the AI just totally used an ARIA labeled by on all the links on this web page that it just created, that's one way we can tell web developers, hey, if the AI does this, A, maybe don't use that model. B, maybe if you have faith in it, try and prompt it out of doing that, because you shouldn't label your links that way. Or C, pass it on. This is why, and the best people to kind of pave the way for practices that involve responsible use or responsibly not using AI. We have to, someone's got to do the research. Someone's got to do the research in the lab, because clearly the companies that make it aren't doing it. They're not, and of course they're not. They're not going to tell you, they're not going to be the ones to tell you you shouldn't use this for XYZ, because that that could take away subscribers. And that's also leads me to another thing. I think the overemphasis on the everything model is, I would say, what's causing the most harm, because I would rather, there's a lot of things that, we'd rather have, and companies, a lot of companies wouldn't, because hypergrowth, but it is always better to have something do one thing or a few things, like a subset of things, very well, than to try and do everything not so great. Look at Reaper, look at the DAW, and how it historically has been known as the DAW that really doesn't have a lot in the way of built-in effects. And as frustrating as that can be for a new user who's looking to, looking for what to do, it does allow it to focus on its primary goal of being the foundation of your production set. The foundation of a house isn't also going to have command hooks for your code, because that wouldn't make sense. Now, would it?
No.
It was like, what was it? The ID mate, the barcode scanner, was, for some reason was having an had an MP3 player on it, because there was a time where, like, just everything was trying to be an MP3 player on the side. I'm like, why? Why can't we just, why not? Why that, when we can have an MP3 player be an MP3 player, or a media player on the computer dedicated to being and the same with we had look at GPS and how there's still appeal for a standalone device, if nothing else, because of that's the device that's going to have the 24 plus hour battery that you may need if you're stranded somewhere and you need your phone to be a phone. And I think with AI trying to have one product do it all, it's taking focus away from specific concentrations because you've got way too much knowledge in its vast brain, and that's going to create the needle in the haystack situation where you're asking it to do something specific and it's going to do anything but, or it's going to do it but not so well. And that's I would say the not so responsible use of AI is trying to use an everything model, like an all-purpose model for everything, without gearing it towards a very specific, like a specific concentrate that can be tuned and made to serve something really well. I mean, and most importantly, knowing full well that that AI cannot, AI can't mimic. It cannot mimic the human experience in all its reality. So the most responsible thing to do is to never assume AI can, never work on the assumption that AI can mimic the real human experience, because it's way too subjective. As it's human, and of course it's going to be, and you cannot possibly account for every single use case. And yet you see companies trying to do exactly that, and oftentimes these aren't the companies working towards accessibility. They're just trying to work AI into whatever it can, but that's just bloat. I mean, look at the bloat caused by numerous products, including AI chat boxes into every single stuff. So ask yourself, is this really necessary? Did users really ask for this? Or are users really asking for this? Or is it just going to create several layers of UX cruff?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see where this all goes. And
it is going to be really interesting. I think I think since it has become the very concept, maybe if not the models themselves, but the very concept has been, the cat's been let out of the bag. So what has to happen really for kind of sustainability and future proof, anything like the image describer models and stuff like that, at some point it has got to be done. Focus has to shift towards running at least some of this concentrated stuff locally, because from a sustainability perspective, from a future proofness perspective, that's really the only way, because we do not want a technology that relies on this image description technology to not have some sort of future proofable way of running that, doesn't what guarantees against something like it not working one day completely with no possible recourse.
Yeah, certainly. And Makara, it's that time in the show again.
It is already schedule time.
Yes.
Wow.
It's been such an interesting conversation. It just flew by.
Yeah, we have to do
really
a part
did.
2 in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But for the moment, what is coming up on the Ali Musa show? Because I saw that there are some updates today.
On Wednesday, that's right, on Wednesday, January 28th, I almost said July 28th, I don't know.
Oh dear.
Month with a J.
Yeah. We're going to be talking all about news and politics with Paul Daniel is going to drop by again, and we're going to be discussing some things that have been going around. And that's the latest on that show coming up. That will be at 7 p.m. Eastern on the that will be on the Ali Musa Show YouTube channel and on the audio.
Excellent. And of course, we've got a books panel coming up next week as well. My gosh, next week already. It's going to be on Thursday, January 29th this month rather than the last Friday, in case you missed those newsletters. Anyone out there in listener land who also tunes into that show? So January 29th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, we will be discussing Anatomy of a Con Artist by Jonathan Walton.
And he narrates the Audible copy too.
Oh, really? That's great. I hadn't seen that yet.
Yes, and of course we'll be back too.
We will be back in just a couple of days. We'll be back for the Sunday show at our usual 3:30 p.m. Eastern, and of course we'll be discussing the dramatization of George Orwell's 1984. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yes, and we also will be here on that day, and we'll have perhaps some more bonus shows coming up too.
Yeah, who knows?
And where can they find us? I believe we are we're on. We've got a Discord, I believe.
We do. We have a Discord, which we don't really plug that often, but it is there for anyone who is hanging out on Discord and wants to join us there. Our server is the Musa Slobodian Network, and we've got channels for most of, if not all the shows. I have to double check, but that's a fun place to hang out. We're on WhatsApp. Same name for the community over there, the Musa Slobodian Network. We're on all sorts of places. Of course, we always recommend you subscribe to the newsletters for the respective sites, whether that's the individual ones for the show or the musaslobodiannetwork.ca for all of your network updates. You don't want to miss those. All you have to do is enter your email. It's completely free. We're also on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn with the shows. Goodreads. Absolutely follow us on Goodreads for all of the reading journey updates. And Jack, where can people find you?
People can find me. I would say there's a. We can put the link in the show notes for this. I'm on. If you want to follow you on Mastodon, that great federated collection of server-based social networks, kind of like what happens when social media and email have a baby, because Mastodon is basically like kind of what the Twitter microblogging concept has grown into, except it can't be. It's a kind of with a focus on accessibility, and there's an openness. But each server can talk to each other. So I am Jack, Jackf, as in F as in Frank, 723 at mastodon.social. We can have that link in the show notes for sure.
Sure.
And on Blue Sky, we're on Blue Sky as well at the Musa Slobodian Network.
Yes. Forgot about Blue
Yes.
Sky.
Yes, I know.
And are you on LinkedIn yet, Jack?
I I think I'm more active on Mastodon, I would say.
Perfect.
As far as engagement goes.
Sounds good. Yes, and yeah, we got to. You know what we need to do, McCara? We should get the Musa Slobodian. We should kind of do the Musa Slobodian Network Mastodon as well.
I thought well, okay, we had one for the shows, but we should get a network one, sure.
Yeah, we had one for the
Instance.
shows, but we want to bring everything under that branding. So
Yeah, of course.
Get an instance for it, yeah. You could have like show at Mrs. like Vodia.network or something like that. Like an account.
yeah,
On each.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then I'm gonna have to create another. I'll have to create another account though, right? Because I've got a few different accounts already.
Yeah, get rid of some of those individual ones because you won't really need those kind of kicking around, right?
No, I could just import my followers, I think.
Oh, there you go.
Followers and friends, I usually import. You can import everything but posts.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
there still isn't a way to import posts.
Yep. And and Makara will be back Sunday.
We will. And Jack, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Let's see. You are very welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to and or watching the Ali and Makara Show. To learn more about the show, please visit the aliandmakarashow.ca. While you're over there, subscribe to the newsletter so you never miss an update. Besides, it's free. Enter your email address and hit subscribe right at the homepage. The Ali and Makara Show is part of the Musa Slobodian Network, where good conversations happen. To learn more about the other excellent programming offered by the network, please visit the MusaSlobodianNetwork.ca.